He refused to abandon the paralyzed alien warrior. Now their bond could save the galaxy. The last survivor. The battlefield had stopped screaming. What was left was worse. The hush that followed when a world ran out of things to kill. Heat shimmered off slagged armor. Mechs lay like broken idols in a temple of smoke. The sky was the color of a bruise, and the wind carried the burnt sweet reek of plasma discharge and melted composites. Sergeant Brian Carter stepped over a toppling panel, and his boot crushed a drift of fused microcircuits with the crisp sound of a candy wrapper. He didn't flinch. The last hour had used up all his flinching. Heads-up display static, comms dead, heart rate a polite green glow that refused to spike, because if it did, he'd have to admit he was scared. He reached back and instinctively tightened the strap across the butt of his Mark 7 rifle. The weapon murmured against his shoulder, the soft hum of a good machine trying to be brave for its idiot human. The 23rd Marine Combat Division had been a thin blue line on a map yesterday morning. Now it was him. A smear of sweat cut a clean track through the ash on his cheek as he picked through shredded barricades, ducked under a skeletal gantry, and scanned for something, anything that wasn't a corpse or a booby-trapped fuel cell. The Drachnids hit fast and hard, triangular assault patterns, overlapping suppressive cones, meat grinder tactics wrapped in cold math. It had been orderly, right up until it wasn't. Report, he said out of habit. The channel offered a whisper of white noise like the ocean in a seashell. His suit's environmental sensors pinged movement faint low, not a mech. He dropped into a crouch rifle sweeping. Smoke smeared the world into layers. The first layer peeled back and he saw her, a body at first half buried, where a collapsed beam had scissored into the ground. Not human, too tall too, composed even in ruin. Silver hair fanned across blackened dirt like a spill of mercury. Skin the color of storm-lit lavender, marred by ash and phosphorescent blood. Her armor was a modern echo of something ceremonial, segmented plates that moved like cloth, a collar traced by faint circuitry. A harness that had once held a blade now snapped at the ring. He almost thought statue before she blinked. His rifle didn't lower. Training said identify. Heart said move. Don't she rasp the word shaped by a melodic accent that made even pain sound precise. It is unsafe. Marine Corps says everything is unsafe. He slid forward anyway, boot edging aside debris. Sergeant Brian Carter, Earth Alliance. Her pupils tightened and then eased, as if a memory slotted into place. Kira Banis, she said. Third Strike Force Larian matriarchy. Her breath shuddered. I cannot feel my legs. He had seen spinal trauma before, the looseness of posture, the way the body's alarms go quiet, because there's no signal from below. He holstered the rifle magnetically along his spine, keyed his med scanner and ran it along her back. The reading painted bad news in polite tones, fracture lines like spiderweb cracks, spinal conduction flattened. Damn, he said softly. Accurate, she agreed. Her face was composed in that alien way, serene enough that if you didn't look at the minuscule tremor at the corner of her mouth, you might think she was fine. Protocol is clear. Retreat with haste. Leave immobile casualties. Right, Brian said, and looked down at the thing his HUD insisted was a clock counting in green seconds. And yet, smoke gusted, and the world added a new noise, the faint mosquito whine of energy weapons cycling to ready. The Drachnids were efficient. They would be sweeping back through to cull survivors and harvest tech. Every open space here would become a killing field again, and he was kneeling in the middle of a bad idea. Look, he said, I'm supposed to say something like, I'll send someone, which is code for I won't. Or, I do the smart thing and I run. Only problem. He slid gloved fingers under the beam, pinning her tested weight angles. I'm not built for smart. Her eyes storm grey shot through with brighter flecks met his. There was no plea there, no expectation either, just evaluation. Humans are stubborn. True. He braced, counted down silently, then lifted. Metal screamed. He expected collapse. Instead, the beam pivoted on a buried hinge and gave him room to drag her free. He shifted her with the unthinking confidence of someone who had hauled bleeding friends out of worse places, and then pretended later that it hadn't hurt like hell. When she was clear, he knelt again, one knee in gravel, and slid an arm under her shoulders and another under her knees. She stiffened, not from pain he could tell now by the way her breath hitched at the wrong moments, but from surprise. Marines were tall and blocky in this gravity. Larians were taller and built like the idea of a blade, elegant lines and hard edges. He could feel how light she wasn't. "Tell me you're not going to object," he said, rising. The suit's servos sang low and patient. "I object to dying here," she said dryly, and let her head rest against his shoulder, as if she had made the decision before making it. "Beyond that, my objections are theoretical. Then we're aligned." His HUD painted 3 red triangles, winking into existence at the edge of his sensor range 2 o'clock. He pivoted behind a shattered wall. A boot slid on glassy slag. He corrected without thinking. Her hand found the plate at his shoulder and tightened a reflex older than language. "They hunt in threes," she murmured. "Visible bait. Flankers close silent." "You guys and your poetry," he said, breath easy. Calm rode him the way it always did when the world got loud. "Bait and flankers. Got it." "You are remarkably calm," she said. "Marine training," he said. "And denial. Mostly denial." Her mouth curved humor ghosting across fatigue. Honesty under fire. Noted. He wanted to keep moving, but the terrain wasn't a maze, so much as it was a junkyard with opinions. He adjusted his grip, careful with her spine, careful with her pride, and made for a collapsed barricade that had become a long V of cover. If he'd had a team, this would have been an easy call, leapfrog lanes of fire covering arcs. Alone the place still existed. It just meant he had to run them with a passenger and a prayer. "Anything else I should know?" he asked, eyes flicking between sightlines and his map, fragmentary but better than nothing. "Drachnid armor," she said. At the neck-shoulder junction, resonant thinness. A precise shot cascades failure. "Nex," he said. "Knew I liked you." Her breath tickled the line of his jaw through the collar seals. The sensation landed like an unexpected memory of being human, and not just a uniform with a brain. He shoved that aside and slid them into the shadow of a toppled turret base as red dots brightened on the HUD. They came in quiet, low to the ground, armored like angry beetles, energy rifles braced along their forelimbs. The bait pushed, visible, aggressive, while the 2 flankers hooked wide like the arms of a closing hug. He put his cheek against her hair and told himself it was for the angle. Left, she breathed. "I see them." He eased her down just enough to free his rifle. She made a small sound at the movement, anger more than pain, so he kept her pulled close with his other arm, his hand firm at her side. "On my mark," he muttered to no one and to himself. The bait raised its weapon. He shot first. The bolt took it exactly where she'd said, between the neck and the shoulder plating, and the armor erupted in a hungry bloom. Shrapnel scythed the closer flanker. The farther flanker twitched and then committed. Brian shifted fire twice more, then shoved backward behind the cover as return fire chewed the edge of the turret base into sparks. Kira's laugh was breath-short but real. "You listened." "Shocking, I know." He checked charge. "Plenty." He didn't say how fast plenty becomes not enough. "You okay?" "I cannot feel pain in my legs," she said then after a heartbeat. But yes, good, because I think they like that and I am tragically popular. He waited for the next push that didn't come. Smart. The Drachnids were resetting the board. He listened. Beyond the crackle of hot metal and the soft animal rasp of his and Kira's breathing, the field spread out like an open hand. Somewhere out there the day still wanted a winner. Your people, she said, unexpectedly almost conversational despite the ruin. When you choose, you do not half choose. We're bad at moderation, he said, and leaving people behind. At home, she said, it would be scandal to accept such help. Pride is a spear we learn early. Pride's expensive, he said. You can rent mine. He shifted her slightly as he rose again, and she made that not pain sound again, and he found himself saying sorry, in a tone he used for things he couldn't fix yet. Do not be, she said. Just do not drop me. I literally never drop anything expensive. You just called me a tactical asset, he said quickly, and she made an amused, affronted sound to prove she was still more than a burden in his arms. He took them on a low path between two half-melted prefabs, keeping to what shadow existed. The suit mapped microcurrents of heat and smoke. He used them the way a fish uses a river. Twice he paused, not because he wanted to, but because the body had to respect what the load demanded. Each time, she watched his eyes reading where he was not where he pretended to be. You are injured, she said. I'm pretty, he said. Different thing. Humans joke when they bleed. We joke so we don't notice, he said. And then because the part of him that hadn't calcified into a plan wanted to, he added, You're doing fine. I have had better days, she allowed. A chirp blinked on his peripheral, a ghost of a signal faint and messy, peeking through interference. It wasn't Alliance clear. It carried a different modulation, almost a harmonic. He might have ignored it if it hadn't repeated with stubborn regularity. Beacon emergency ping. The sweat at his temple cooled. You hear that, he asked. She tilted her head slightly. A call. Old. Lyrian frequency family. Faint. Direction. She shut her eyes for a heartbeat. When she opened them, they seemed deeper, like she had tuned herself to a different world. She lifted her chin very slightly toward the east, toward a tangle of fallen transit frames and a half-collapsed hangar dome. There. Of course, it's through the worst part. He tried on a grin and found it fit. We're going to crash a party. Her hand tightened on his shoulder plate again, not fear this time, agreement. Then go Marine. He went. The route demanded compromises he didn't want to make. Twice, he had to choose open ground over cover, because the cover was a death labyrinth of electrified wire and unexploded everything. Twice the Drachnids swept close enough that he felt their shots scald the air. He moved with that particular stillness. Soldiers learn a stillness full of measured violence, held politely in hand. Between one breath and the next, his HUD offered him a gift, a stuttering icon resolving into a crude symbol, then into something crisp, an emergency identifier he'd never seen in person, only in briefings. A Lyrian treatment chamber beacon, not Alliance, not standard. Old tech. Sacred tech, the briefs had said with a bureaucrat's neutrality that always meant we don't really understand this. Could be a trap, could be damaged beyond use, could be salvation wrapped in a cultural incident. He looked down at the woman in his arms. She had tracked the change in his posture before he could school it and raised one eyebrow. Well, she asked. Got a maybe, he said. In my experience, she said, voice steady, maybes are where miracles hide. Great, he said, and shifted his grip, and the suit adjusted load calculations like a sigh. Let's go find one. A fresh wind slid through the ruins, carrying the cold metallic scent of rain that would never reach them in time. Far behind, something detonated lazily. Far ahead, under the cracked ribs of the hangar dome, a faint blue pulse answered, and then answered again like a heartbeat, teaching itself to be brave. Brian Carter tightened his hold on Kira Barnes and stepped into the dark. carrying fire. The ruins stretched out like a graveyard that refused to settle. Every step Brian Carter took with Kira Banis in his arms was a negotiation between strength and exhaustion, between duty and the whisper in the back of his mind that said he should have left her behind. He ignored it the same way he ignored the burn in his legs. Marine training had taught him to shove pain into a dark box and use it as fuel later. The beacon pulsed ahead, blue faint maddening, like hope dangling on a string. The weight of stubbornness. Kira was heavier than she looked, not because of her body, though. Larian warriors were built like blades forged from star metal, but because of the wreckage clinging to her armor and the way she carried herself even unconscious. Her head rested against his shoulder, her silver hair catching every flicker of dying flame. They passed, as if the battlefield itself wanted to light her like a relic. He adjusted his grip carefully, mindful of the damage to her spine. His suit readouts nagged at him, power draw from the servo's microtears in the left knee joint, but he ignored them. "Your heart rate is steady," Kira murmured, suddenly breaking the silence. Her voice was faint but clear, threaded with a warrior's discipline. Unnatural for someone hauling dead weight through a war zone. "You're not dead weight," Brian shot back, ducking behind a scorched mech carcass. "You're extremely valuable cargo. High priority. Fragile label handle with care." Her lips twitched into the ghost of a smile. Flirting while evading death. How delightfully human. What can I say? Multitasking is a survival skill. Dancing with death. A sharp ping blinked red on his HUD. Hostiles. 2 o'clock closing fast. Brian crouched, setting Kira against the cover of a broken support pillar, his rifle sliding into his hands like an extension of his bones. The Draconids emerged, angular beetle-shaped, their armor glistening with oily green light. 3 of them, moving in their perfect triangular formation. Bait and flankers, just like she'd warned. Kira's storm-gray eyes sharpened. Visible ones distract, others circle wide. Watch left. Brian nodded, his mouth a grim line. He steadied his rifle heartbeat, still infuriatingly calm. He squeezed the trigger. First shot slammed into the bait's vulnerable junction at the shoulder-neck seam. Armor flared white-hot, then detonated, sending shrapnel through the flankers. The Draconids screeched in mechanical harmony. Brian pivoted 3 more shots, each guided not just by his training, but by the quiet certainty that came from Kira's instincts, bleeding into his awareness. 3 seconds later, silence. The banter that kept them alive. "Impressive shooting," Kira whispered, her eyes still scanning. "Impressive intel," Brian countered, sliding back to scoop her up again. "We make a good team." "A crippled alien princess and a stubborn human grunt," she said with dry humor. "What a pairing." "Hey, don't sell yourself short. You're the one giving me tactical cheat codes. And you," she said, voice softening, "are the only human fool enough to use them while carrying me instead of fleeing." He chuckled, but it came out tighter than he meant. "Yeah, well, I didn't make it this far just to walk away." Her gaze lingered on him, then stormy eyes narrowing, as if she were trying to see through the layers of bravado. A Larian could read silence like scripture, and Brian suspected she was learning more about him than he wanted to admit. Through smoke and shadow, they pressed on, weaving through toppled barricades and skeletal remains of prefabs. Twice, they had to stop, once to duck a sweeping patrol, another time because his suit hissed a warning about overheating. "Set me down," Kira said the second time, her tone sharp. "Not happening," Brian said, shifting her higher against his chest. "You'll burn out your exosuit, and then we'll both die." "I'll burn out first," he said. "The suit's just following orders." She tilted her head, silver hair brushing his cheek. "Do all humans defy logic this aggressively?" "Pretty much our brand," Brian said. "We do impossible things because we're too dumb to know they're impossible." For the first time since he found her, She laughed short-pained, but genuine. It startled him more than enemy fire. The beacon's promise. The blue pulse grew stronger, lighting the shattered hangar like a heartbeat. Brian quickened his pace, vaulting debris with a kind of reckless momentum that made him forget the weight in his arms. Kira's hand tightened unconsciously on his shoulder. That glow, it's not standard Alliance medtech. It's sacred. Larian healing chamber. Our most guarded secret. Sacred-like. Effective or sacred-like don't touch or you'll anger the gods. Both, she whispered, eyes flickering with awe and fear. The chamber doesn't just heal. It bonds. Patient and operator, one mind, one body. Among my people it is considered more binding than marriage. Brian nearly tripped. Wait, you're saying this thing is an alien wedding pod? Her expression softened a strange mix of amusement and solemnity. Enter it with me, Marine, and our lives will never again be separate. Cliffhanger to Part 3. The chamber's pulse washed over them, painting her silver hair in ethereal blue. Behind them, his HUD flared, new hostiles converging. Dozens. Brian tightened his grip on Kira, jaw set. Well, he muttered, guess we're about to find out just how married I'm willing to get. And with that, he stepped toward the glow. The sacred chamber. The hangar was a cathedral of ruin. Half the dome had collapsed inward ribs of bent steel, clawing at the twilight sky. Fires guttered in twisted hulls, and every surface gleamed with the sheen of plasma scorch. Yet, in the heart of all that death, something impossibly alive pulsed. The Larian chamber stood untouched, its crystal frame glowing with a steady azure rhythm, like a heart refusing to surrender. Brian Carter froze at the sight. His HUD tagged it as unknown. Non-Alliance tech. Caution. He muttered, well, that's comforting. In his arms, Kira Bani stirred. Even weakened, her storm-grey eyes widened in awe. By the first light, a sacred healing chamber. Here in human territory, her voice trembled with something he hadn't heard before, reverence. Brian carried her closer, stepping through the shadows of broken struts. The pulse of the chamber washed over them, cool and warm at once, settling into his bones like an invitation. The revelation. What exactly are we walking into? He asked, adjusting her carefully against his chest. Kira's gaze stayed fixed on the chamber, her voice low. This is not simple medtech. It is the oldest gift of my people. It heals by resonance. To restore one, it must link with another. Two beings entwined at every level. Mind, body, spirit. Sounds intimate, Brian said, eyebrow raised. She turned her head, silver hair brushing his cheek. Among my people, entering a chamber together is more binding than marriage. Once joined, there is no separation. Our essences would merge forever. Brian blinked. Wait, forever, not like a trial period. Her lips curved in something almost like humor. Forever. If you choose this human, you choose me, not just now, but always. The choice. Brian lowered her gently onto a piece of shattered plating crouching beside her. For the first time since he found her, she looked vulnerable, not from injury, but from the weight of the choice. Protocol is clear, she whispered, echoing her words from earlier. You should flee, survive, leave me. To step inside with me is to risk not only your life, but your humanity itself. The chamber may change you. Brian looked back at the doorway they'd entered. His HUD pulsed, red drachnid signatures closing in. Dozens now, the whole swarm homing in on this beacon, like sharks scenting blood. He clenched his jaw. Let me get this straight, he said. Option 1, run, abandon, you die tired when they catch me. Option 2, roll the dice in a magic alien wedding pod with a gorgeous warrior princess, and maybe survive. Her cheeks flushed faintly violet. You reduce sacred ritual to, "Lady, I've been reduced to ashes, to body counts, to one line in a casualty report. Forgive me if I pick the option with better company." Her storm grey eyes softened. "You would choose this, knowing what it means." Brian leaned closer, voice steady. "I didn't drag you out of that grave to stop halfway. If forever is the price, I'll pay it. I don't leave people behind, especially not you." For the first time, her mask of warrior calm cracked. A ghost of a smile curved her lips. Stubborn human. Damn right. The bonding. Brian lifted her once more, stepping into the chamber. The crystal walls hummed at their approach runes, igniting with alien light. The interior smelled faintly of ozone, and something sweeter like starlight distilled into liquid. "Lie me down here," Kira instructed, her voice trembling between pain and anticipation. "Then place your hand over mine. The chamber will guide the rest." He did as told, laying her gently on the crystalline platform. She looked impossibly radiant in the glow silver hair, haloed by the chamber's light lavender skin catching every flicker. Their hands touched. The crystal pulsed brighter. "Now step in beside me," she whispered. Brian hesitated only a second before climbing onto the platform, his body aligning with hers. The chamber shifted, curving around them like a cocoon. Their faces were inches apart, her storm grey eyes locked on his. "This is your last chance to walk away," Kira murmured. Brian grinned, despite the pounding in his chest. "Not a chance, beautiful." The chamber sealed with a hiss. The merge. Light exploded, liquid fire coursing through Brian's veins, yet not pain. He gasped as a flood of sensation slammed into him. Kira's presence filled his mind, her thoughts, her memories, the disciplined rhythm of her warrior's heart. At the same time, she felt him, the raw stubbornness, the ache of old battles, the reckless humor he used to hide fear. Their genetic codes danced, spiraling together in luminous strands. He felt his body rewriting itself, aligning, adapting. He sensed her shock at his acceptance, no hesitation, no resistance. She embraced his courage, his refusal to quit. In return, he tasted her awe, her pride, and the fierce loyalty she guarded like a blade. The boundaries between them dissolved. Two became one. For a breathless eternity, Brian Carter was Kira Banis, and Kira Banis was Brian Carter. The aftermath. The light dimmed. The chamber opened. Brian gasped, rolling onto his side. Every nerve tingled, every breath felt charged. He blinked, and Kira's storm grey eyes met his, now flecked with hints of brown. She sat up slowly, wonder on her face. Her legs trembled, then steadied. She stood whole again. "I can walk," she whispered. Then her eyes widened. "And I can feel you, your thoughts, your emotions." Brian swallowed hard, standing beside her. He realized he could feel her too, her relief, her awe, her attraction. His lips curved. "Well, that's new." Kira's cheeks flushed. "Among my people, such a bond is absolute, permanent. We are joined." Brian smirked. "So does this make me your space husband, or what?" Before she could answer, his HUD screamed, red enemy signatures flooding the hangar. Kira's hand found his, their bond sparking like fire. "Then let us fight," she said, her voice steady now. "Together." Brian tightened his grip on his rifle, their hearts pounding in unison. "Hell yeah," he growled. "Let's show them what forever looks like." Fire and blood. The hangar's silence shattered. Brian's HUD lit up with a dozen, then 24 Drachnid signatures swarming from the north wall breach. The guttural whine of energy weapons charged the air, followed by the clattering march of insectoid armor on broken steel. Kira Banis didn't flinch. She stood taller than she had before, her silver hair flowing in the chamber's fading glow. Her legs no longer trembled. They carried her like a warrior reborn. But it wasn't just her body that had changed. Through their bond, Brian felt the steel of her resolve inside his own chest, as if her heartbeat now echoed in his veins. And she felt him, his stubbornness, his refusal to bow, his protective fire. The connection was intoxicating. Symphony of War. The first Drachnid squad stormed through the wreckage. Rifles raced. Brian brought his plasma rifle up. He didn't need to think where to aim. He already knew because Kira's sharp alien senses flowed through him. He saw through her instincts, sensed the shift in the air as the enemy moved to flank. He fired before she even warned him. The first Drachnid dropped armor bursting at the weak neck junction she had identified earlier. "Left flank!" Kira shouted, but Brian was already pivoting, catching two more in controlled bursts. She blinked in shock, then smiled, predatory and approving. "You feel me?" Her thought brushed against his mind, clear as words. "I feel everything," Brian answered, not with his voice, but with a fierce grin. She lunged forward, her twin energy blades humming to life, arcs of violet light tracing the air. He covered her automatically rifle shots, timed perfectly with her slashes. One Drachnid raised a weapon behind her. Brian shot its hand clean off. She ducked as another tried to pounce on him. Her blade split it in half before it reached him. It was a dance. A lethal, beautiful dance. Battle banter. "Your aim has improved," Kira teased, spinning to gut another enemy. "That's because I finally got a good instructor." Brian shot back, mowing down two more with surgical precision. Her laugh was wild and fierce, filling his head as much as the battlefield. Stubborn and amusing, dangerous combination. "Wait till you see my other tricks," he said, snapping a grenade into a cluster of advancing Drachnids. The explosion painted the hangar in burning green ichor. The surviving insects hesitated, unnerved by the unnatural synchronicity of their foes. The first pulse, then something shifted deep inside their bond. A spark that wasn't Brian, that wasn't Kira. It was smaller, softer, but burning bright. Brian staggered, his shot going wide. What the hell was that? Kira froze, her blade dripping alien blood. Through their bond she felt it too, an echo inside her, inside them. She dropped her guard for half a second, hand pressing to her abdomen. Her storm-grey eyes widened in realization. "The chamber," she whispered. "It did more than heal me. It accelerated the bond." Her voice trembled. "Brian, I think I'm carrying your child." Brian blinked, stunned, even as Drachnids regrouped. "Wait, already?" Larian physiology combined with the chamber's resonance, yes. The bond made it instantaneous. Her lips pressed into a hard line. And the child? It's already active. That pulse, we felt it was them. Brian's jaw tightened. "So you're telling me we just got space married, and now we're having a space baby? In the middle of a firefight?" "Your people are insane," she muttered. "And yours." He fired another shot, rage and awe mixing in his chest. "Yours must be crazy too if this is normal." Despite herself, Kira laughed, a rich, wild sound that echoed across the battlefield. The bond grows. As the Drachnid surged again, Brian felt another pulse from the spark within Kira. But this time it wasn't random. It was guiding. His HUD blinked a warning, just as he instinctively ducked. An enemy shot scorched the air above his head. "That wasn't me," Kira said, stunned. "I know," Brian replied grimly. "That was Junior." The unborn child was enhancing them, linking their awareness, tighter, sharpening their timing. Every step, every shot, every blade strike came faster, cleaner. They moved like a single organism, a perfect fusion of human tenacity, Lyrian grace and something new, unstoppable together. The Drachnids roared, charging in a mass. Brian and Kira didn't retreat. They advanced. He fired, in perfect rhythm with her slashes. She spun around him, her blades weaving arcs of violet light, while his rifle carved through weak points. The two of them flowed around each other, their bond making them impossibly efficient. Left flank, she thought. He was already firing. Above he shouted. She leapt, cutting down an enemy mid-pounce. Behind them, explosions rocked the hangar as Drachnid corpses piled. The swarm broke under the onslaught, hesitating in the face of impossible coordination. Brian smirked, sweat streaking his ash-stained face. Guess they didn't get the memo, never fight a couple on their honeymoon. Kira chuckled, her storm grey eyes blazing, especially one already expecting. Cliffhanger to Part 5. The last Drachnid fell, its armor sizzling as it collapsed. The hangar was silent again, but not safe. Brian's HUD flickered, warning of hundreds of new signatures moving in from the east. Kira's grip on her blades tightened. They'll keep coming. We need a stronger position. The Alliance bunker, Brian said, recalling the tactical map. 3 clicks west. Reinforced automated defenses. Her storm grey eyes met his, the bond pulsing between them with warmth and urgency. Then we run. For us. For our child. Brian swallowed, adrenaline burning in his veins. He tightened his rifle strap and nodded. Then, let's show the galaxy what happens when you threaten a Marine's family. And together they sprinted into the fire. The bunker ambush. The march westward felt like dragging destiny by the throat. Brian's HUD kept spitting red triangles across his field of vision, but every one of them fell short, routed by quick bursts of plasma or the arcs of Kira's blades. They fought like a single organism, now their unborn child's pulsing awareness weaving between them like a third combatant. Every danger revealed itself a heartbeat early. Every strike landed with uncanny precision. Still, Brian knew they were running out of road. The Drachnids didn't tire. And he was carrying not just his rifle and armor, but something infinitely more fragile, the beginnings of a family. The reinforced silhouette of the Alliance bunker finally rose ahead, half buried in a collapsed ridgeline, scarred by recent combat. Its armored doors bore fresh scorch marks, and the perimeter turrets were dark. Kira hissed, her storm grey eyes narrowing. The defenses are offline. That's not a malfunction, it's a trap. Brian adjusted his grip on the rifle. Figures. Nothing's ever easy. Into the wolf's den. The bunker's outer gates stood ajar, edges melted like wax. The moment they stepped inside, Brian's HUD flickered, friendly system pinged, then warped into red. The Drachnids had hacked the bunker and turned its defenses inward. A wall of gunfire erupted. Brian dove behind a half-shattered barricade, pulling Kira down with him. The corridor ahead blazed with stolen Alliance turrets, their automated tracking systems cutting the air into death-laced grids. Kira pressed a hand to her abdomen, grimacing as another pulse rippled through their bond. Brian, the child, they're doing something. He blinked. Doing what? The HUD stuttered. Then, without him touching a thing, data windows opened, Alliance targeting patterns, Lyrian encryption overlays, Drachnid virus signatures, all layered together as if someone or something were rewriting the entire system architecture in real time. Brian's throat went dry. No way. That's Junior. The child's intervention. The turrets wavered, hesitated, then rotated away from them. Their targeting reticules flickered confused, as if suddenly unsure who was friend or foe. Kira's breath caught. They're interfacing, not just with one system, all three. Human, Lyrian, Drachnid. The child understands them, merges them. Brian barked a laugh despite the danger. Kid's not even born yet and already a hacker. Not just a hacker. Kira corrected, awe in her voice. A breach. The turrets swiveled and spat death into the shadows ahead. Drachnid soldiers, who had been waiting for Brian and Kira to stumble forward, screeched in alarm as their own ambush disintegrated. Looks like the trap backfired, Brian muttered, surging forward. The command center. They fought through twisting corridors, every step guided not just by their instincts, but by the subtle tug of their unborn child's awareness. Maintenance tunnels appeared on Brian's HUD before he knew they existed. Security overrides unfolded in Kira's mind like old memories. They burst into the command center, a cavernous chamber of dark consoles, shattered holographic projectors, and Drachnid corpses left behind by the automated purge. Main console Kira said, her instincts pulling her toward a central dais. If we reactivate the bunker's grid, we can hold against anything. Brian dropped into cover near the entrance rifle already blazing as Drachnids poured in from side passages. Do it! I'll buy you time. 30 seconds of hell. Kira's hands flew across alien consoles, her bond with Brian keeping her situational awareness razor sharp even as she hacked. She didn't just see the code, she felt it guided by the unborn child's resonance. Every barrier opened for her, like a lock finally meeting its key. Brian fought like a man possessed. His plasma rifle sang, each shot threading impossible angles. He wasn't just aiming, he knew where the enemies would be because Kira's senses and the baby's awareness poured through him. 30 seconds, she shouted. I'll give you 60. Brian growled, emptying a magazine and slamming a fresh one in. Take your time, beautiful. Through their bond, she felt his grit, his iron refusal to give ground. Through hers, he felt her pride and determination, her joy at fighting with him rather than alone. The child pulsed again, and the consoles flared. Systems online. Kira's voice rang out. Defense grid online now. The bunker roared to life. Turrets unfolded from walls and ceilings humming with power. But instead of Alliance standard patterns, the fire they unleashed was different, smoother, smarter, almost alive. Brian's jaw dropped as Drachnids fell in droves, cut down by a defensive system that fought like a veteran soldier. That's not regulation fire control. Kira's hand pressed to her abdomen, awe flickering across her face. It's them. Our child isn't just activating the systems, they're directing them. Brian barked a laugh, even as he gunned down another wave. Guess I know which parent they take after. Her lips curved in fierce amusement. Bold words for a man hiding behind his wife's childbearing miracle. Touché. After the storm. Minutes later, silence returned, broken only by the hiss of dying circuits and the rasp of Brian's breathing. The command center glowed with restored energy consoles, alive under the hybrid control their unborn child had forged. Brian leaned against the console, sweat dripping down his face. Kid just turned a Drachnid ambush into a shooting gallery. Not bad for someone who doesn't even have a name yet. Kira placed a hand on her stomach, her expression a mix of pride and unease. Brian, do you realize what this means? Our child is more than a hybrid. They are a weapon, a bridge, a future neither of our species could have created alone. Brian pushed off the console, moving close, resting a hand over hers. His brown eyes locked on her storm gray ones. They're not just a weapon, Kira. They're our kid. And I'll be damned if anyone else decides what that means. For the first time since the bond, she leaned into him without hesitation, her warrior mask cracking into something softer. Then we fight for them, for us, together. His HUD blinked, pulling him back to the present, multiple new signatures closing fast. Hundreds. The Drachnids weren't finished. Brian chambered a fresh power cell and grinned. Good. Let them come. Kira drew her blades, her eyes alight with battle fire. And within her their child pulsed, ready to fight too. The delegation. The bunker felt alive. Every console hummed with strange resonance. Every turret tracked with uncanny precision. Human plasma tech and Larian energy matrices should have cancelled each other out, but instead they flowed like twin rivers into a single sea. It wasn't the bunker doing this. It wasn't even Brian or Kira. It was their unborn child, pulsing in the bond like a quiet, determined heartbeat. The calm before, Brian leaned against the edge of a console, reloading with practiced ease. He tried to project casual confidence, but his mind kept drifting back to the tiny spark he felt inside Kira alive, aware already rewriting the rules of war before even being born. Kira sat on the steps, leading to the command dais, her silver hair matted with ash, her lavender skin bruised, but healing rapidly. She rested one hand over her abdomen, her storm-gray eyes closed, as if listening inward. "You're talking to them, aren't you?" Brian asked, breaking the quiet. Her lips curved faintly, not in words, in feelings. The child's thoughts are not yet formed, but their intent is strong. They want us safe, together. Brian shook his head with a low chuckle. Not even born yet, and already bossing us around. Definitely my kid. Or mine, Kira countered with a sharp smile. Through their bond, Brian felt her amusement, her pride, and beneath it, the sharp edge of fear. Not fear of the child, fear of what came next, because they both knew the Alliance and the Larian matriarchy wouldn't leave this miracle unchecked. The arrival. The alarm chimed inbound shuttles. 2. One broadcasting Alliance Navy codes, the other pulsing Larian command frequencies. Brian swore softly. Speak of the devils. Minutes later, the command center's heavy doors hissed open. A squad of human marines in crisp armor swept in, followed by Larian honor guards in ceremonial silver. Between them walked two figures who radiated authority like heat. Admiral Jonathan Thompson, Alliance Navy, tall grizzled eyes sharp as plasma fire. And beside him, Matriarch Arara, towering even for a Larian, her golden battle armor gleaming, her expression carved from stone. They stopped at the base of the dais. Sergeant Carter Admiral Thompson said, voice clipped and neutral, "You've caused quite the stir." Arara's storm-dark gaze shifted to Kira. "Princess Banis, reports of your survival are unexpected and troubling." The interrogation. Brian's straightened rifle slung across his chest, refusing to look cowed. "If you're here to thank us for saving this bunker, you're welcome. If not, make it quick. We've got more bugs inbound." The Admiral's eyes narrowed. "Your combat logs show system integration that's impossible. Human and Larian tech working seamlessly. Care to explain?" Arara's gaze cut sharper. "Or how you survived with injuries that should have left you crippled, Princess. And why our sacred chamber was active in this place." Kira rose slowly, proud and unflinching, despite the scrutiny. "Because we used it." Brian and I entered together. The chamber fell into silence. Even the soldiers shifted uneasily. Arara's voice was cold steel. "You bonded with a human. That ritual is sacred, permanent." Brian stepped forward, jaw tight. "Yeah, permanent. Get used to it." The child revealed. Before either leader could retort, the consoles flickered. Holographic displays sprang to life, unbidden projecting battle logs, tactical overlays, and most shocking, real-time fusion of human and Larian systems. The bunker wasn't just alive, it was singing. Admiral Thompson's voice dropped. "That isn't possible. Our fire control algorithms can't even handshake with theirs without a meltdown." Arara's eyes narrowed, though wonder cracked her mask. "And yet it is happening." Kira laid a hand over her abdomen, her voice quiet but unyielding. "It is the child, our child. The bond forged more than unity between us. It created something new." The Admiral froze, eyes snapping to Brian. "You mean to tell me?" Brian cut him off with a wry grin. "That I knocked up a warrior princess in an alien healing pod, and now our kid's rewriting military doctrine before he's even born, yeah. That's about the size of it." Gasps rippled through the room. The Larian honor guards stiffened as if struck. Arara's voice cracked like thunder. This is an abomination. But her outrage faltered when the bunker's turrets swiveled not at Brian or Kira, but toward the corridors where Drachnid signatures were massing again. The hybrid systems flared with power, annihilating the enemy before they could breach. Brian smirked. Call it what you want, matriarch. I call it survival. The debate of futures. The Admiral folded his arms, studying the holograms with tactical hunger. If what you're saying is true, this child could be the key to integration across the entire front. Efficiency, unity, victory, Arara bristled. Or it could be the death of both our cultures. A hybrid without precedent breaking sacred law. The matriarchy will not accept this. Kira's voice sharpened. Then the matriarchy will have to learn. This child exists. They are no experiment, no abomination. They are mine, ours. And they will shape the future whether you approve or not. Her storm-gray eyes blazed, and Brian felt her fury through the bond. He stepped beside her, his hand resting firm on her shoulder. And anyone who thinks they can take them from us will have to go through me, through us. The bunker hummed louder, as if echoing their defiance. The threat beyond. Before the argument could boil over, the alarms shrieked again. This time it wasn't a patrol, it was a wave. Hundreds of Drachnid signatures converging on the bunker from every direction, a last-ditch attempt to erase the impossible victory that Brian, Kira and their unborn child represented. Brian's grin turned feral. Looks like the debate's on hold. He locked and loaded. Kira's blades ignited with a predatory hum, her expression daring the Drachnids to come closer. Let them come. Arara's honor guards hesitated shaken. Thompson's Marines raised their rifles, unsure of what side they were truly fighting for. The Admiral glanced at Brian, then at the holographic projections alive with impossible harmony. His jaw tightened. Then prove it, Sergeant. Prove this bond isn't just an anomaly. Prove it's our salvation. Brian smirked, gladly. He felt Kira's fire through the bond, felt their unborn child's steady pulse. 3 warriors now, not 2. And as the bunker doors trembled under the first impact of the Drachnid swarm, Brian Carter spat into the silence. Time to show the galaxy what family means. The final assault. The doors buckled like a drumskin hit by a god. Warning glyphs cascaded across the command center, human red interlacing with Larian silver. The whole bunker thrummed alive, with a pulse that was not electricity, not quite spirit, something new threading the two together. Brian felt it through the bond, like a second heartbeat layered over his own. Kira felt it too. Her hand tightened over her abdomen, calm and fierce. Between them, their unborn child's presence brightened curious rather than afraid. Admiral Thompson's Marines formed firing lines along the upper catwalks. Matriarch Arara's honor guard took the flanks, blades folded to rifles, helms lowering, with a hiss. 2 armies that had never quite trusted each other found themselves shoulder to shoulder, pretending they were ready to be one. The door split. Drachnids poured through in a jagged tide beetle-helmed infantry spidery sappers, skittering low hulking rams, shouldering a battering lattice that crawled with sickly green light. The vanguard loosed a storm. Grit, Kira said, voice steady. Already there, Brian answered, because they were. He didn't touch a console. He didn't have to. Their child reached out, and the bunker breathed in. Turrets unfolded like flowers, not with Alliance staccato, but with Larian grace. Plasma muzzles and energy veins tessellated into a lattice that cupped the breach. Targeting solutions bloomed in Brian's vision, annotated with Kira's instincts: neck shoulder seam, low runner left sapper, under girder overcharge in 3, 2, fire, Brian said. The bunker obeyed. A net of light stitched the entrance. Human plasma stitched through drachnid plates with brutal efficiency. Larian matrices tuned the pulses so each bolt found resonant weaknesses and unraveled armor from the inside out. The first wave shattered. Sappers shrieked and curled their payloads, detonating harmlessly short. The ram shouldered through debris anyway, relentless. Thompson's head snapped toward the tactical hollows. Those firing curves, who's orchestrating? Kira's answer was simple and impossible. Our child. Arara's gaze flicked to Kira's hand, then back to the breach. Prove it. The ram struck. The doors boomed hinges, tearing another inch. The drachnids, pivoted tactics with machine-speed jammers, rolled forward like black stones, unfurling petals of interference that howled across the spectrum. Human turrets hiccuped. Larian matrices flickered. We lose the grid in 5 seconds. Brian felt not as a calculation but as a certainty pouring through him. He opened his mouth and found the next move already set on his tongue. Kira, sing them straight. She nodded once, eyes half-lidded. Her people's battle meditation had always been a private thing, a rhythm breathed into the bones of a unit to steady hands and sharpen sight. Now, the child took that rhythm and braided it through the bunker's nervous system. The jammer's howls met a counter-chorus, not sound, not code, a pattern. Turrets that weren't designed to hear listened. They retuned in a sweep, harmonics rolling like a tide. The jamming washed up against the wall of their song and went thin and watery. Human systems held lock. Larian matrices brightened. Impossible, one of Thompson's techs breathed. It is happening, Arara said. But there was no scorn in it now, only something like awe threaded through iron. The ram hit again, and the whole bunker rang. Cracks spidered from the door's upper latch. The drachnids committed pouring bodies into the breach, forcing a meat bridge over their dead. The net cut and cut, but the tide climbed anyway. Time to plug it, Brian said, swinging his rifle on the run. Kira was already moving. They hit the stairs together, flowed down opposite rails, met at the landing like two halves of a comet. Marines parted without being asked. Larian guards, angled synced by a command, neither language had words for. Brian vaulted a barricade, landed in the spray of sparks, and let the bond drag the world into focus, so sharp it bordered on pain. Left flank shoot now. He did backhanding a shot the way a pianist brushes a string. Kira ghosted under his arm, spun, and parted a sapper from its payload by the breadth of a thought. He felt her satisfaction fizz in his blood. She felt his grin answer. A hulking drachnid surged through the narrowing gap plates, layered thick to shrug off plasma. Brian didn't bother with the chest. Nexium, Kira's certainty slid into his hands, and his shot burrowed into the soft point and bloomed like a star. The corpse became a barricade. He vaulted it and kept going. Above, Kira said aloud, didn't need to, because he already felt the shadow drop. He fired straight up tracers, turning the pouncer into slag that sizzled past his shoulder. You're showing off, she added, and he could feel the laugh she didn't have time to give. Gotta impress my wife, he said, and the honor guard nearest them actually barked a laugh, and then remembered to be terrified. The ram hit again. The doors tore hemorrhaging metal. The lattice behind the ram hummed higher, gathering a pulse that would make the next impact final. The grid could not hold it. Brian saw that future like a line in his hut, doors open, flood drown. The child saw it too and pushed. Everything in the bunker inhaled. Hollow tables flared. The turrets rose a fraction and pivoted not toward the breach, but toward each other angles, aligning into a halo. Ratios drifted that no human had written and no Larian had sanctioned. The halo brightened, feeding pulses into pulses until the air between gun and gun became glass. Thompson Brian shouted, not looking back, "Do not shoot, let it build." On whose authority? The Admiral snapped. On mine, Arara said. Before Brian could answer, voice suddenly low and absolute. Look. They did. The halo sang. The child spun human frequency into Larian resonance and back again, braiding signal into structure. When the ram hit the bunker, didn't resist. It received. The impact's energy fell into the web like rain into a reservoir. And then the halo exhaled. The returning wave wasn't a blast. It was a mirror. It ran back into the lattice that had ridden in behind the ram, found the harmonics of Drachnid aggression, and handed them back gift-wrapped. The lattice shuddered. The hulks behind it spasmed, armor splitting like old bark. The shock rolled through the assault, toppled ranks like dominoes. For a stunned heartbeat, the swarm went still. By the first light, Arara whispered. It reflects violence into its source, while sparing the innocent fields it crosses. This is doctrine-made weapon. It's math, Thompson said hoarsely, and then as if ashamed to have made it small and a miracle. The Drachnids adapted as they always did. The wave fractured into packets, some trying to burrow beneath others, climbing along the walls like ants devouring a carcass. The halo couldn't be everywhere. Brian and Kira were already moving to where it wasn't. They fought in a seam the net could not catch, close and ugly where turrets dared not shoot. Brian's rifle barked in half-beats that dovetailed Kira's blades. Kira's footwork set angles that turned his shots into inevitabilities. They bled because even gods get nicked when they wade into tides, and Brian tasted iron, and Kira tasted that he tasted iron, and both of them burned hotter. Brian, Kira said, not aloud, but in the place where there was no distance. They are bringing up a second lattice. It will not hit the door. It will detonate in the corridor to bring the roof down. Got it. He cast his sight through the bond, took the child's offered ghost map of ducts and struts and load-bearing bones. He pointed two fingers quick. You. He snapped at Marines who didn't know why they obeyed an NCO this hard. Up that ladder. Kick the brace. On my mark. He jerked his head at Arara's nearest captain. Angle your veins 30 degrees and push when I say push. On whose the captain began. Kira met her gaze and didn't blink. Mine. The Larian adjusted veins. The Marines clambered. The Drachnid lattice rolled into position like a storm cell. Mark, Brian said. Plasma lanced into a joint. The child had highlighted a place where three pieces couldn't quite agree to be one. The brace above gave. The Larian veins shoved a pressure wave sideways instead of up. The roof didn't fall. The far wall did right on top of the lattice. The detonation punched out into empty space where it could only impress the mountains. Silence, breath, then gunfire again because nothing ever ends clean. Except this did not long after. The swarm didn't break all at once. It shivered, lost coherence, collapsed into pockets that still wanted to die for an order that no longer felt inevitable. And then a change ran through them like a rumor. Brian felt it before he understood it. The child unfurling farther than the bunker, touching the Drachnid battle network. The way a hand touches water, not to crush, not to cut, but to show. For a handful of impossible seconds, every Drachnid in range saw what Brian and Kira felt. Two minds twined without conquest. Two technologies singing without erasure. A third presence that wasn't threat, but bridge. Unity not as surrender, but as a greater kind of strength. The swarm faltered. The ram's crew backed away first. The sappers followed. The infantry didn't flee so much as decide not to advance. Inevitability cracked. The tide went out. Ceasefire wasn't declared. It simply happened. The bunker system settled into a low, satisfied hum. Smoke drifted. The last echo found its place and died. Marines lowered rifles with hands that trembled. Honor guards stood very still because that was the only way to not show anything on their faces. Brian leaned his shoulder against a pillar and laughed short and raw. His legs wanted to shake. Kira slid in under his arm, not because she needed support, but because he did. Their child pulsed small and bright and proud. Thompson approached first helmet, off hair damp with sweat. He looked at the wrecked door, at the halo, at the two of them, at Kira's hand still and certain on her belly. "Sergeant Carter," he said, voice roughened by things he was not accustomed to admitting. "Princess Bunnies, consider me convinced." Kira angled her head, measuring him. "Convinced of what?" "That the old lines on my maps are wrong," the Admiral said, "and that the fastest way to win a war is to stop fighting the wrong one." Arara came then slow as a verdict. Up close, her armor hummed with histories. She studied Brian like a problem she respected. She studied Kira like a daughter who had outgrown the room her elders built for her. When she spoke not as a politician, but as a warrior priest. "In our oldest songs," she said, "there is a prophecy of a first bridge, no ship, no span of stone, but a leaving joining that would carry my people over a chasm we could not even name." Her gaze dropped to Kira's abdomen. "I dismissed it as metaphor. I was mistaken." Kira's chin lifted. "Will you condemn us?" Arara's jaw worked. "I will protect you," she said at last, each word an oath hammered true. "Because that is what one does when something sacred stands in a crossfire." Brian exhaled a breath he hadn't meant to hold. "Glad we're all on the same page." "We are not," Thompson said, but there was a faint smile in it. But for once, he glanced at Arara, and the matriarch met his look without flinching. "We can write the next one together." Kira's hand found Brian's. Their fingers fit as if they had been designed for that purpose by an engineer who loved impossible things. Through the bond warmth rolled, and beneath it a flutter that wasn't theirs alone. "Our child is tired," Kira murmured wonder, softening every syllable. "Let them rest," Brian said. He looked out over the battered command center, and the people in it, human and Larian, scared and stubborn and still standing. "We've got work to do while they sleep." Arara turned to the doorway to the broken field beyond. "Then let the matriarchy send healers and engineers. We will repair this place as we remake our laws." Thompson keyed his comm, already barking orders, voice crisp again but changed. "And the Alliance will stand watch. Anyone who comes for this bunker comes through me." The world breathed. For the first time since the doors buckled, the silence was not an absence. It was possibility. Kira leaned into Brian and let her helm retract silver hair, spilling over ash and light. "You said we would show them what family means," she said. Brian kissed her brow because there were things you didn't say in front of generals and matriarchs and still needed to say. "We did." He felt with the clarity of an oath that the next battle wouldn't be fought with turrets and blades, but with rooms and laws and hearts unpracticed at bending without breaking. He also felt, because their child let him feel it, that they were capable of that fight too. "Come on," he said, straightening, squeezing Kira's hand. "Let's go build a world our kid won't have to save." She smiled, like a sunrise finding metal and turning it gold. Together, they turned toward the future as the bunker's light settled and the halo dimmed, and 3 heartbeats, human, Lyrian, and something new, found the same steady rhythm. A bridge between worlds. The war was not over, but the war had changed. 3 months after the bunker incident, the world looked different. Human and Lyrian banners flew side by side. What began as a shaky truce, forged in desperation, had become the seed of something more. Joint patrols guarded the border sectors. Engineers who had once refused to speak now worked shoulder to shoulder, swapping blueprints across languages and pride. And at the center of it all, the Unity Medical Center. The waiting. Brian Carter paced the gleaming corridors, his combat boots loud against polished hybrid flooring, steel reinforced with Lyrian crystal, humming softly with energy. Every wall here sang with harmony, human efficiency, welded to Larian elegance. The hospital itself was proof of what he and Kira had fought for. But right now, Brian didn't give a damn about diplomacy. His jaw was clenched fists flexing at his sides as he waited outside the birthing chamber. He could take down a Drachnid patrol with a half-empty rifle and one working knee. But this waiting to become a father left him raw and restless. Relax. Kira's voice brushed across the bond gentle, despite the sweat and strain threading through it. Your pacing is shaking the entire floor. Brian huffed, glancing up at the ceiling. Combat's easier than this, he muttered. Her laughter, even tired, warmed his chest. And yet this battle we fight together. The birth of a future. The chamber pulsed with soothing blue and silver light as healers moved like shadows around Kira. She lay on a platform that hummed with both human monitors and Lyrian resonance tones. Her silver hair was spread around her like a halo, her lavender skin glowing faintly from the merging technologies. Brian slipped inside as the doors parted. His presence filled the room like a storm front, but Kira smiled when she saw him even through the intensity of labor. Flatterer, she whispered, voice taut. You look more terrified than I feel. Brian dropped to one knee beside her, gripping her hand. You're glowing like a goddess. Meanwhile, I'm just trying not to faint. The bond carried everything. Her pain, her strength, her fierce focus, and his determination, his awe, his stubborn refusal to leave her side. For hours they endured together, sharing every breath, every cry, every push. And then, with a cry that seemed to reverberate not only through the room, but through systems themselves, their child was born. Aries Cartabanis. He was small, fragile, perfect. His skin shimmered faint lavender, shifting under the light. Wisps of silver threaded through brown hair. His eyes opened, storm gray flecked with human warmth. And as he drew his first breath, the entire medical center systems pulsed, acknowledging his presence like loyal soldiers, saluting a commander. He's perfect, Brian whispered, tears threatening to cut through ash and scar. His massive hands cradled the infant with impossible gentleness. Kira, exhausted but radiant, leaned close. Ares, she murmured the name they had chosen, a name for a warrior who unites. Through the bond, they felt not only their son's warmth, but his curiosity. Even moments old, his presence brushed their gentle trusting aware. Reverberations. Within days, word spread. Humans and Lyrians crowded the halls, desperate for a glimpse not of the child himself, but of what he represented. To the soldiers who had bled for scraps of ground, he was hope. To politicians, he was proof of a future they had not imagined. To the Drachnids, watching from their borders, he was something else entirely, a warning. Arara the matriarch came first, towering in her ceremonial armor, her stern eyes softened by awe. The first bridge, she whispered, gazing down at the sleeping infant. Prophecy walks among us. Admiral Thompson arrived with his staff, trying and failing to look purely pragmatic. These boys living proof our two peoples can be more than allies, he admitted gruffly. He's the future, Brian bristled. He's my son, not a weapon, not a symbol. Mine. Kira's hand found his shoulder, grounding him. He can be both, beloved. Ours first, but also the galaxy's. We will teach him balance. The vow. That night in the quiet chamber where Ares slept between them, Brian traced a finger across his son's tiny hand. When I found your mom on that battlefield, I thought I was saving one life, he whispered. Turns out, I was saving the galaxy's future. Kira smiled, her storm gray eyes glowing in the half-light. Then let us raise him not as human or Lyrian, but as both. As bridge, as proof. Through their bond, Ares stirred his small consciousness, brushing theirs a spark of love, an infinite possibility. Brian kissed Kira's brow, his voice fierce and low. Let them come with their politics, their doubts, their wars. We'll face them all because nothing in this galaxy is stronger than us. Than family. Kira's silver hair brushed his cheek as she leaned against him. Together always. And as they held their son, the first true hybrid of two worlds, the galaxy outside trembled not in fear, but in the dawning realization that humanity and Larians had just rewritten history.